Hi everyone, me Funkagenda. I'm back here at the Fader Pro Studios for the Toolroom Academy. I'm going to be showing you over the next few hours how to start tracks. Because obviously it's all very well like having an idea, like, oh, I'm going to do a track that's like got a sample out of, I don't know, like a Bill Withers record or something like that. But, how do you actually get to that point where, you know what you want to put into the record? How do you decide, what your sound palette is going to be? Do you just leave it up to a bunch of happy accidents or whatever? So I'm going to try and show you a few ways for a few different genres of how to sort of maximize your workflow and get things going nicely, nice and quick. I'm also going to try and show you some of the, I hope that what it shows you while I'm doing this is some of the processes that I go through when I'm putting together a record, because obviously this is going to be the way that I would do it. You don't have to do it this way, but I'm hoping that you'll come away with some ideas and some inspiration, and that it gives you a sort of a kick in the right direction. So the first genre that we're going to look at is probably the genre that Toolroom Records is most famous for, and that is like tech house. Tech house is a very groove-based music. So it's one of the few genres where I actually start with the drums. A lot of people, when you see they're in the studio technique things, they'll say to you, oh, I always start from the drums and then I build on top of that. But I find with more melodic or sort of, breakdown heavy music, I like to start from the musical elements. But with tech house, the really important thing is the groove. So, first of all, I like to get myself a nice kick on the go. You use a lot of the bass in tech house comes from the kick itself. The plugin that I tend to go for most of all for this, rather than going for a sample library, is the Sonic Academy kick plugin. So with Sonic Academy's kick, basically you get a pitch envelope for using the for deciding how the kick sort of how the pitch of the kick decays and where it decays to. Everything is as you can see listed as notes. So you get the frequency of each note, but you also get the actual note. So you can tune your kicks to a key, and you can sort of like really fine tune them so that they sit well in the mix. You also get an amplitude envelope that you can play with. You get an envelope for click. Now a click is like a transient sample that you can put in, and if you find yourself a really nice transient that you can sort of drop in there, like you can really make your kicks sound, you can make your kick sound really original. So what we're going to do is we're just going to start off with a bog standard sort of 4 on the floor kick pattern. So we're going to insert this here. I'm just going to drag this over 16 bars and put a loop on. This, much like most samplers, starts at C3. So that is going to be like your first note. And I'm just going to highlight that and hit the loop button. So when I go back out onto the main screen, you'll see that I've just got one kick for each beat. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit play on this, and you can hear it's already quite a nice bassy sort of kick, but it's a little bit EDM, like it's a little bit sort of like main room, and that's not really the kind of vibe that you're going to go for with tech house. So I'm going to mute off the click for the moment, and we're just going to start with and listen to the actual sort of the actual bass part of the kick. What I like to do, because the kicks are quite long, and because they carry a lot of bass in them, and you can extend the length like this if you want, or you can make them like super short. But I like to make them a little bit longer So I'm gonna make mine about 800. And then I tend to sort of, if I want the kick to be on like E, then I'd sort of bring this to, say, F sharp 1, and then I bring this down to E, and the kind of the middle ground of this is sort of roughly where the kick is going to sit, but it'll sit perfectly with like anything that you put over the top in E. It's a little bit low probably for this, so I'm just going to come back up, and we'll say we'll do this at kind of like F sharp. So I'm going to go from G to F, so the middle ground of that is F sharp. And then I'm going to bring the initial attack down. So you can see it really reduces the amount of click that happens at the start of the, so that immediately is like a much cooler sort of kick sound. So we're going to unmute the click now. And let's go for something a little bit houseier. So that's pretty cool. I kind of like that though, you know. It's not too obtrusive, but at the same time it's got like a little bit of a vinyl-y sort of feel to it. And you can, with this plugin, you can tune the kicks up and down, and the pitch up and down and everything. So it's all, it's very sort of tactile as far as it goes. You can literally create any kind of kick that you want with this. So I'm going to save this as there we go. Let's go into factory, user kicks. And we'll call this Tech House Kick. So that's kind of cool. We've got that's going to be at the sort of bottom end for our track. So we know we're going to be roughly in F sharp for this. The next thing about Tech House that is really sort of standard, and it goes against my kind of principles as a producer, if you like, but it's very loop orientated. People like to use loops and stuff on it. It's that live feel of the bongos and stuff that makes it sound the way it sounds. So I've got a ton of loops and stuff here. Let's start with, let's have a listen through some of these. So that's kind of a nice basic, but it's a little bit sort of swingy. That's got kind of a nice groove to it though. Now, one of the things I like to do with Tech House is I like to cut the loop lengths down to like 2 bars, 2 beats, sorry. And the reason that I do this is it just makes them a lot more loopy, and it makes them a lot more, like it gives you that kind of like repetitive feel. I feel like all the best Tech House grooves and best techno grooves are kind of the ones that sit over 2 beats. We can probably turn these up a little bit because, like, obviously you can see they're recorded live, so they're really quite quiet. I'm just going to time correct some of the hits. You don't have to do this if you kind of want that live sort of feel, but me personally, I'm very much about getting everything. I like things to be on the beat. And also it's fun to play around with the where you're starting the loop, because you can see we're starting on this very quiet hit here. But with Ableton, you can switch the start point around, so you can try this section, and it gives you completely different feels each time. See, I quite like that. That's got kind of a nice... And then we could perhaps move the loop point across. So I'm kind of down with that. I think that's got a really sweet groove to it. And then what I'm going to do, just to create a little bit of interest here, I'm just going to set that up on an 8-bar loop, and I'm going to put gating on the kick. So what this means I can do is if I consolidate this, I can shorten these last 2 kicks. So see how that sounds. So you lose that bass that's kind of droning over it. Let's just shorten those even more. So let's stick with that. Now, the next thing we kind of need to do is get, like, we've got that percussion in there, but we need to get a sort of a housey kind of vibe in there. One of the sample companies that I have come to really respect, particularly more recently, but I mean, they've been good for a very, very long time, is Pacotech. They make these incredible sample banks that are just so usable, and they're very simple as well. That I think is the key. They don't overdo things. They don't make things, you know, just like totally like crazy or whatever, so that it's so obvious that it's one of their loops. They just make stuff that's just really useful, and they created this this sample bank that's just called Classic House Loops, and I mean literally it is just very simple, very usable tops. So what we're going to do is we're just going to throw one of these in there as well, and let's see how that pans out for us. And we can try a couple of them, you know, and just see which ones work the best. But these are always good to provide a nice little bit of sort of vibe in the background. I mean, you could literally just do that, and that's like, that could be the start of your record. I don't personally, like, I feel like you have to build on top of that, you know? A good way of using loops, and a good way of really making the most of them, is to not actually use the full loop. Like, I feel like this needs some sort of skippy hat type things. So I'm just gonna loop around this section here. And there's some great little skippy hats in these loops. So what we can actually do is I can just go into the loop, and I'm just gonna put the volume envelopes on, and I can just draw. Let's just mute all of these now. And I can see the skips, obviously, there's one. Let's loop this over the full length. And then I'm going to just take this section here and put it there. And so that's going to be kind of our new loop now. We'll just delete the drums that we're not going to use. I mean, you can go straight in and delete the drums first of all if you want to, but I like to just mute things off with the volume envelopes and just see what sounds good. And also, you can create much smoother transitions between the hits. But as you can see now, I've literally just isolated those skippy hats, and I'm just going to loop that. I've consolidated the part, and we're going to loop that across there. So that now is the full length of our track. Let's bring these bongos down a little bit. Now, one of the other things I like to do personally is I like to use the hits that I've isolated or the hits that I've chosen in a particular loop as one-shots. So what you can do, there are several ways of doing it. The first way that you can do it is you can go into the loop and you can put a marker on every hit like I've done here, and then you can just isolate your section like this. You right-click, and you say convert drums to new MIDI track. So you hit that, it finds all the slots for you, and then it recreates a MIDI pattern for you with all of the hits on there. But what I tend to do more often than not is actually just hit the drums like this and just grab each one so that it slices them up as audio. There's no particular reason why I choose to do this over the other one. It's just my kind of preference. And then what I do is I highlight them all. I go down to the window and I take them off warp mode so that they're all in one shot mode. Now you'll see some of them are shorter because this beat was at a different tempo, but then I can just pitch the whole thing down so that they all get a little bit of extra length on them. Let's just pull the window down so I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, so you can see now that they all run into one another and it's all perfect. And now we can just highlight that. And if we want to kind of like tune these down and make them a little bit lower and a little bit more lo-fi, we can do that. I kind of like them there though, I gotta admit. So let's just drag these across. Make sure when you're dragging them across that you have got a correct loop length. What you can do is you can actually like consolidate that into a part now, and it'll be perfectly sliced MIDI notes, and then you can just put the loop on it, make sure it's at 2 beats, and just drag that across for the start, from the start to the end. And so now if we play this, so the next thing is maybe we want to get like a little bit of life into those percussion parts. So here's our little skippy snares, which you can hear there. A really good trick to put life into these things is to give them width, like stereo width. The way that I do it in here, and there are equivalent ways of doing it in pretty much all the DAWs, but the way I do it is I use this plugin called Simple Delay, and I put it on, make it 100% wet, take the sync off so that we're working in milliseconds, and I link them together so that they're back down to sort of 1 millisecond. So it's like the delay is so small that you'd never notice it. And then I just push one of them. Let's say like we'll push this 6 milliseconds, and instantly you get stereo width. And like it might not seem like a lot, but when you drop that back into the mix, that stereo is very, very noticeable. I mean, it makes the part sound like louder, you know? So you have to kind of bring that down again in the mix. But we're also going to put some reverb. And sometimes I like to put a little bit of delay on like percussion loops. Like not a lot, but... So like if we're listening to that, like I'd maybe get the filter delay. That's obviously far too much delay. But we're going to turn the feedback off, and then I'm just going to alter the EQ. Let's put it on. And then we'll just reduce the volume. So you can see it just gives you like a little bit of a tail on the end of the... It's like barely noticeable. But it kind of swings the percussion along a little bit. And we're also going to go for, let's just save this. Also get into the habit of saving your stuff, because I can't tell you how many times I have gone to do a track, and I've got, you know, maybe 2 hours into the track, and then suddenly a plugin has crashed the system, and you know it resets all of your software synths, and you know like you lose some of the work that you've done or whatever. So really it's something that you should get into the habit of doing. So we're just going to save this to the desktop now as Tech House Starter, and that's that done. And I'm going to put the Valhalla vintage verb on it. So we're going to pick, let's say the large wood room. That sounds kind of cool for this sort of stuff. You click the mix button, obviously, so that the mix stays locked at whatever we put it at, no matter whether we switch presets or not. And you can hear that's a really nice, you know, that like that's got a really nice live sound to it. Now obviously this is kind of very housey that we've got going on here. So we need to get a little bit of tech in there as well. Let's just drop that same Valhalla verb on the and I'm just gonna at the very end I'm just gonna double that up so that we get just like a little turnaround. You know what? We'll consolidate this. And we'll there we go. So what we're going to do is get some kind of techno sort of vibes in there now. Now I've got Paco Tech have brought out some really good techno sample packs, but a lot of the sounds that people are going for now are kind of a more of a retro kind of feel. So like I've been going back to sample CDs that I bought like maybe 8 years ago, because they've got so much, like the sounds are so much more, it's weird, they're 8 years old but they're so much more current, if you understand what I mean. Like rather than everything sounding new and crisp and exciting, they actually sound old. So I've got this like Uberschall Essential Techno, which came out like years and years ago, and there's just some great loops in here. So we're just going to cycle through a couple of these. We're not going to use the whole loop. We're just going to use some hits from the loop, but okay, so first off, I kind of like that. I don't want it to have loads of impact, but I do like the way it sounds. You'll see even these loops, they're actually in mono, like they're not even in stereo. I mean, that's how old they are, but they're so good. So I'm gonna loop this round again on 2 beats so that it matches up with what we've already got. I'm gonna time correct them because it's very loose, because they were done, I think, on an Akai S1000. And then I'm gonna EQ the bottom end completely out. So what we just get is the top end of the loop. So you'll see, let's just go to the EQ on here, and let's put it up on the screen. I'm just gonna do a low cut here, and I'm gonna take it all the way up, and we'll start the loop off, and then I'm just gonna gradually bring it back in until it sounds cool. So you see that is like pretty much all I'm going to use of that is just that frequency range. But it brings life to the track, you know, like because it's got that old, like grimy sort of feel. You know, it's got something of the sort of like, something of the Carl Cox about it. Also, one of the things I do is I don't bust my kick, because I mean the kick is pretty much golden anyway. But I always take the percussion parts and I always bust those so that I can put compression on them. So I'm just gonna turn this channel into a bust now. For those of you who don't know how to do this, you can do it in 2 ways on here. You can use groups, and you can just highlight the ones that you want to put into a group, and you press Command G, and it creates a group, and then you can put effects on the group and it affects all of the different tracks. I don't like to do that because you can't group a group. Like, and you might think, well, why on earth would you want to group a group? The reason that you would want to group a group is maybe you want to put a channel that's got a particular mastering effect on it, but you don't want it to be on all of the parts, just several of the groups. Well, once you've got them into groups, that's it, they can't go anywhere. So you're kind of like screwed. So what I do is I take the channel, I turn the input on, and we're just gonna label this drum bus. I always color code my drum buses red. And I also always put an underscore at the start. This is an amazing tip that I got from Steve Duda. Because when you come to do your stems afterwards, all you need to do is open up the folder with all of your stems in them, and if you go into the search bar and type underscore, it brings all of your groups up at once, so that you can separate them from your actual individual instruments. So Steve, thank you for that one. I've done that ever since you showed me. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to take the outputs of these channels, and we're going to send them from instead of going to the master, we're going to go to drum bus. And so now you'll see the drum bus turns orange here. And if I solo that, that's all of our drum parts. What I like to do with my drum buses is I use a technique called mid-side EQ. It's a really nice way of putting width into the drums using EQ. Basically, with mid-side, what it does is it separates the signal into two two individual sections. You've got everything that goes up the middle, and then you've got everything that's at the sides. And as some of these things have already got stereo in them, we know that they are going to go, you know, some of them are going to be pushed to the outer side. So the way you do this, there are a ton of plugins that have got mid-side EQ on them, but Ableton's plugin, Ableton's onboard EQ has already got it. You'll see it says here mode. You click on that and you go to M/S, and that puts it in mid-side mode. Mid is orange and side is green. So with the mid, what I tend to do is push the sort of low, mid, and mid frequencies. That's kind of where the snare is and stuff. So I'm going to push the 200 hertz frequency, which is like roughly where the snare goes. If we just have a look, you can actually see the snare is at 160 on here. So we're going to put this down to 160. We're going to put the Q width about 2, and we're just going to push it about 3 dB. And that's just going to make the snare knock a little bit. And I'm also going to push band 3, which is around about 1,000 hertz. So it's sort of like mid eking into the upper mid. And I'm just going to push that up by 1. It's almost unnoticeable. And then we're going to flick to the sides. And now what I like to do with the sides is I like to push the treble at the sides so that it creates like an airy, sort of spacious sort of feel. So you can see that's where the mid is now, going across the screen. You can sort of follow that, but it's gray at the moment because we're working on the sides. And on the sides, I'm going to take the 2.3 kilohertz, or like 2300 hertz sort of frequency area. We're going to put a steep Q on it of about 3. We're going to make this into a shelf, and we're just going to push this maybe like 3 dB. So you can see that's just shot up. Oh, I've done it on the wrong one though. We'll pull this back. 300. There we go. We can turn these ones off. And so now you can see that's like in contradiction to the middle, that's pushing the outer part of the signal. And so we've got this brightness out here, but then in the center, we've got this very, you know, very sort of punchy snare signal. And that's just a really simple way of getting like a little bit of stereo width into something that, you know, without having to use loads of like enhancers and stuff like that, just done with the EQ, you know, it's very, very simple. I'm also going to take a little bit of the bottom end out of the outside because, you know, we want the punch to be kind of in the center anyway. That's where the kick's going to be, and that's where the bass is going to be. So I'm going to put just a low sloping cut on the back end, just only about like sort of, I'm going to take it to about, let's say 60 hertz, which is kind of like where the bottom end of the kick is. And again, that's just on the outer parts. It's not in the center. So hopefully if you're listening to this in stereo at home and not on like your laptop speakers or whatever, you can really hear the difference. Like when I take this off, everything gets really dead center and sort of like dull. But when you put this on, it becomes really lively on the outside, you know? So that's just like a really simple thing I like to do that creates stereo width. And then also I'm going to use the glue compressor with this full parallel preset. And that's pretty much just what I do with my drum buses. And it just kind of tames them a little bit. So let's shut this back down and we'll unsolo this. Now we can probably do with a better clap than that. So I'm gonna open up a MIDI channel now, and instead of being on every one like the kick is, it's gonna be on every 2 beats. So we're just gonna insert a MIDI clip here and make each one 2 beats long, which I think it actually already is. And obviously middle C, we're gonna just drop a note in there. And then let's go to some of the libraries. Now, there are like billions and billions of sample libraries out there, and you know, there's no right or wrong ones to go for, but I must admit, a lot of the sample libraries that I go for are older sample libraries. If you're after what I believe is like the most comprehensive selection of drums that you will ever get your hands on, I can't recommend any sample CD that's higher, held in higher esteem as far as I'm concerned, as Thomas Penton, Essential Drums and Percussions, Volume 1. Both me and Mark Knight have just smashed this, but we still probably haven't even used 5% of the drums that are in here. You'll see I'm going to the clap folder now, and I'm going to open the clap folder up. And just in the claps, there are 279 full 24-bit stereo claps. Everything from classic drum machines to live claps, like the flappiest, crunchiest claps you can possibly imagine. And it's like this for every single thing. There's like 250 kicks, there's 250 snares, there's shakers, percussion, like there's loops in here. It's literally the best sample CD for drums I have ever come across. So, and I've been lucky enough to speak to him actually through Facebook, and he sent me his other sample CDs, and they're fantastic as well. But this one is gold dust. I mean, it really is just the best. So we're going to use Ableton's onboard sampler. In fact, we're going to use Simpler, which is its kind of like little brother. And all you need to do to open one of these is like you get a blank MIDI channel and you just drag a sample into the instrument bar at the bottom, and you'll see it automatically opens Simpler. It's ready to go. Make sure you push the velocity to 100 because that gives you full velocity scaling. And we're going to bust this through the drum bus like this. I'm going to drop it down by the kick so that I know what's going on. Because I don't know what it is, I always have to go like kick, then clap. That's just been kind of ingrained into my mind that that's the way that drums go down the screen. And we're just going to hit play. So you can hear, that's kind of like a live clap. And then what you do to cycle through these is if you just go to the bottom corner of the Simpler window, you'll see that there's a little kind of like two arrows doing this, and that's the hot swap logo. So you click on that, and then you can just hit down and enter, and it'll cycle through the claps. So that's pretty cool. That's like an old sort of drum machine clap. And a good tip, what I do is like when I find them, the ones that I like, I stop, I duplicate the track, which is Command D, I mute the one that I was just listening to, and then I go back into hot swap mode and carry on. So I might get like 5 or 6 options of claps that I want to use, and they're still all open on the screen. And because Simpler is such a small plugin and it requires no CPU power, you can have hundreds of these things open, and it doesn't really make a dent in your CPU. I mean, I'm at 1% now, so so we're going to go back down and keep going. Now this one, you can see this one has got like what you call like, I mean, it's come to be known as pre-clap, but basically it's like just a really lazy attack. So a good thing to do with these, I'm kind of thinking I'm going to use both of these together. I don't want to get bogged down in getting, you know, because if I get too involved in this and I start picking like, you know, this is the perfect clap and this is the perfect thing, like basically we won't be talking about how to start a track. It'll just be, let's watch Adam make a track. So I'm going to go into the pre-clap one and I'm going to move it back so that it actually starts before the bar. And by doing that, you get this kind of very live sort of sound. You move it forward a little bit. There, you see? So that pre-clap hits before the actual clap does, and it creates a really nice live feel. And when you stick that over the top of the loop, it feels really natural and really live. Now we can use the same trick that we used on the little skippy percussions here. the stereo delay, but because we don't want it to be like the same stereo delay on all the tracks, because then they're all going to sound the same, I like to just, like in my head, I kind of like invert them. So we'll drag this over. If you we're going to copy it, so you just hold down Alt and just drop it onto that lazy clap that we've got. And so you see this one's on 1 and this one's on 6. So I'm going to put this one on, let's say we'll put this one on 1, but we'll put this one on 7. So it's almost the same, but it's inverted and slightly different. That gives you this great stereo now on that clap. I'm just going to pull them down in the mix now. Let's just take the kick away for a second so we can get an accurate reading on the volumes. That sounds about right. So here's a great point about what I was saying about the buses. Both of those claps, I want those to be treated the same in the mix. But I also want to be able to bust them into the drum bus. So I'm going to take an empty audio track. I'm going to put it just above the claps here. I'm going to put the input mode on, and I'm going to call this the shock horror, the clap bus. We're going to put that red so that I know that it's a bus. We're going to change the track in on both of these channels here, these two channels, from drum bus to clap bus, and then we're going to get the clap bus and we're going to push that into the drum bus. There's a lot of bussing going on in here. So now I've got that channel just controls the claps. Then I'm going to EQ these. I want to make them a little bit brighter. I don't want to give them a snare treatment really, because that's a little bit too bottom heavy. So I'm going to just do this manually for you. You can see here is kind of like the sweet spot, because this is where like all the frequencies are sort of bunched together. So I'm going to push that section just a little bit and just thin the Q off slightly. I kind of want it, you see there's like a nice spike there. I want that to be the thing that hits. And then I'm going to put some brightness on the top of it as well, because it's a little bit dull. So I'm going to say 2,800 hertz, Q width of about 3, and I'm just going to push that about 2 as well. Now I've already got stereo on this, so we don't really need to do the mid-side thing. And then also this is going through the bus channel that's got the mid-side on it anyway, so we don't need to do that. I'm going to put this 24 slope on this, and I'm just going to take everything off below about 120. See, that's got so much life, so much more life now. I'm going to put a snare compressor on it, so we get a nice bit of attack. And then I also want to put like a snare kind of reverb on there. So I'm just going to hit save so that we don't lose that. Again, we're going to go for the vintage verb. I'm going to put it before the compressor so that the reverb gets compressed into the sound as well. That's like purely choice. Like you don't need to do that. That's, that's entirely up to you whether you want to do that or not. Me personally, I like it when the snare, when the reverb and the sound get merged together, and you get that kind of like power sort of snare. It's always like the Phil Collins kind of effect. And I'm going to use the exciting snare room preset. So I'm just going to click the mix, and we're just going to. So you can hear that just adds like a lovely bit of width and decay onto it. So now, I'm going to put a bigger reverb on this this little ding noise, this little skippy thing, because it's not. I kind of feel like that needs to hang over. It's a little bit too. It's a little bit too. What's the right word for it? It's kind of like nondescript at the moment. Let's compress that a little bit as well. I'm going to delete that first one. I'm going to delete that one as well. Let's just create a little bit of interest in the pattern. And then we're just going to drop the kick back in. Bring the drum bus down a little bit because I want the snare to cut through some more. Now, one of the good tricks that you can do with kicks to make them a little bit more punchy is use a transient designer of some kind. Now, there's a ton of transient designers out there. If you are using a sampler and you're using a sampled snare, you can do it with the decay and the sustain. With this kick plugin that I'm using right now, you can do it with the amplitude. But what I tend to do when I want to do transient design is I use LFO tool. So we're back on Steve Duda's plug-in grind. But this thing is great for this sort of stuff. If you go in and you just set it on quarter notes, because obviously that's where the kick drums are. I select the down curved saw and I put it on a very slight attack like this. And then when you play it, you'll hear that's just the very start of it. And you can see if you put the visualizer on, the outer section here, this is what the actual sound is doing. And then the inner section is what it's letting through. So you can get this to really enhance the click on the kick. And then you just pull the amount down, let's say to like halfway. And then you can just push the volume of this channel, or you can drop the volume of the drum bus. I mean, this is at naught, so technically, because this is at unity gain, you should actually bring this down, but it doesn't really matter on Ableton because of the floating 0 point. But if I just bring this down now, and then just turn the volume up, you'll notice that the kick's just got so much more bite now. You know what? I'm actually going to elongate the kick a little bit as well, because I feel like we can have more like we can really make that note hang out. It's almost like that's the bass line, you know? So I think we still need to get a little bit more techno kind of vibes in here. So let's go back to the Ubershell techno bank that I've got, and maybe have a look at some of the add-on sections. So let's try some of these. try that second one again. There's a little bit in there that I kind of like. Let's just loop this. Okay, so we're just going to do the same thing that we did before. We're going to put the envelope in draw mode. And then I'm just going to draw in and I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the little skippy, part. I'm going to copy the sample delay over and just change the timing on it so that I get a little bit more stereo out of this. So go to audio effects, and we're going to get the simple delay. Now I've created a whole bunch of these already, you can see. So I've got like 1 and 5, 1 and 10, 1 and 15, 1 and 20, then 5 and 1, 10 and 1, 15 and 1, and 20 and 1. So that's like different scales of offset, different amounts of stereo for both left and right channels. It's always good to be prepared and have stuff like this on board, because it saves a hell of a lot of time. So I'm going to put the 1 and 10 on this one. And that gives us a really great stereo. And I'm going to copy the vintage verb from the Skippy channel as well. And that should sound fantastic. I can probably bring the mix down a little bit on it. So we're just going to stick this on loop and just drag it to the end. So now let's listen to the whole pattern together. So that sounds pretty cool, right? I think that sounds cool. Next, we want some hats. With these sort of things, I tend to go for just like old school 909 kind of hats, because it's just the sound, like it's just, again, a lot of the sounds that people are using these days are super, super retro, You get like organ basses and like old DX7 sort of FM style basses, and you get like rave sort of pianos and all that kind of stuff. So really, don't be worried about whether you're using like modern sounds or old sounds or whatever. Like just kind of vibe it out. My vibe tends to, when I do these sort of records, tends to be just a little bit more old schooly, because that's kind of the period that I've come from, and I kind of, it's the sort of thing that I kind of do. So I'm going to go back to Thomas Penton. Like I said, this sample library is like thebomb.com. We're going to go into the hi-hats and just these opens here, like just straight away. Like the first one is an amazing 909 open hat. I'm just going to throw this across here, like full loop, hit the eighths quantize, drop that there, and then just loop the first 2 8th beats. We want to put this on full velocity, and I'm just going to take it down to the bottom and bring it in. Again, we're going to put this into the drum bus. And you'll instantly hear that did you hear how stereo that got then? Again, that's just because of the mid-side EQ that we've got on it. Just gonna put a little bit of a compression on that extra little percussion we put in. Like put a multi-band on it. And then I'm feeling like, just for one last kind of figure on the drums, like some old school kind of claps would sound really good. Maybe some like 808 claps or something. Like in this last section, you know, I kind of, you know? So we'll get like a real sort of good 808 sort of clap. I'm pretty sure I've got like a bunch of old drum machines in here somewhere. I mean, it's, you know, I've got so many sample CDs, like over so many years, you really do get lost in them all. But I feel like if I drop into Thomas Penton and go back to the claps, what was the one that I used there? I used clap 6, so clap 3 I haven't used. So we're gonna just get a MIDI part. Grab clap 3, drop it into there. Create a MIDI part. Oh, wait a minute. I need to actually go onto a MIDI part to do that, though. There we go. So you see, I'm going to put these in here. Quite the right sound, but let's just quickly flick through the sounds for a second. Oh, actually, you know what? I kind of like that though. And then what I do, just to create a little bit of life in those, is you see you have there's a section here that says random. If you just put that on about 20%, it randomly pans the hits. So what you actually get is, and it just kind of like jumps around a little bit. So we're just going to pull this down. And that is going to be our basic drum beat. So the next thing we're going to look at is the bass. So the next thing we're going to look at is the bass line. Now, one of the things that I have noticed recently is this resurgence of retro house. You know, we're using a lot of organ sounds. We're using a lot of the old FM bass sounds. You know, Disclosure tend to love the FM bass kind of vibes and stuff, and you know, just kind of like a generally sort of funkier sort of feel rather than just like super serious. That's something that Toolroom seems to do a lot of. You know, obviously we have like we have a lot of piano house, we have a lot of organs and stuff. So I figure, as this is the Toolroom Academy, that's what we're going to do with this. So we've got this amazing groove, very, very cool. We can look at a couple of different bass figures, but I'm going to go in first with a kind of like, I think maybe like an FM style bass. So I'm going to use Rob Papen's Blue. This is a great FM synthesizer. So I'm going to go into the digital bass section. And you can hear it's like already it's got that great retro house kind of vibe. Just something really simple like that is like kind of the perfect sort of figure. So here we go, we're going to go. We'll toy around with that last bit because it's not that good, but the rest of it is pretty cool. So we're going to just go in with this. So first thing we're going to do is quantize it. So for those of you that don't know the shortcut, it's Command A to select all, Command U to quantize. I always set the grid to 16s when I'm doing quantization because it's just, I mean, like you're not really going to quantize stuff to 32s unless you're doing like sort of drill rolls and stuff. So really, this is kind of perfect. And also the other thing I like to do is if you hold down Shift and you press the back arrow, it pulls everything so it's like super short. And then you can make everything exactly the right length, which is what I've done here. You'll have a couple of things that'll overhang. So that obviously has overhung there. So I'm just going to alter that. And we're just going to make everything the same velocity as well. Let's just do, that should be enough. And we'll just pull the velocity down a little bit because it affects the amount the FM synth. And then I'm just gonna drop the volume of the channel back. So you can see it's not particularly loud, but we don't need to push the channel. I don't like pushing any of my channels over unity gain. There'll be other people who'll say, you know, oh, that's just ridiculous, like blah, 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 why not? Da, da, da. Because like unity gain is there for a reason. You've got 6 dBs of headroom above unity gain. You've got like minus 60 dBs underneath unity gain, and you can always turn stuff up in the master. I mean, my master at the moment is set at minus 10. So like if I turn that up to 0 and we play from there, we've got plenty of volume, you know, it's like we've got loads to play with. So what I need to do is I need to bump this up a little bit. It also needs some effects. Reverb is a great thing. Normally you don't put reverb on basses, but with synth sounds like this or with organs, reverb is kind of like essential because it's part of the original sort of FM bass, organ bass kind of vibe. I'd like to use kind of like rooms and gated reverbs for these kind of sounds, unless you're in a breakdown, in which case you can sort of go ahead and use like halls and stuff. But I'm going to go with I mean, you know what? Obviously, I love the Valhalla reverbs. I've talked about them no end in the other tutorial I did for you guys, and I've already mentioned this several times today. So, you know that I'm going to go for this every time. I'm going to go for, let's try this big ambience gate, because that's kind of what we want. We want ambience. See, that's great. I mean, that's like literally perfect. really enhances that that upper register, the kind of the little high upper register part. It's like fucking superb. Pardon my French. I get really excited by the Valhalla stuff, because I mean it's so well thought out, and the algorithms are just perfect in it. I mean, it's so good. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a multi-band reverb on, multi-band dynamics on. Now, I kind of, sometimes with these FM sounds, it's really good to go sort of over the top on the compression. And there is a preset on here called OTT, which is what I use for all my like electro and more sort of progressive sort of stuff, but it actually works really nice on these kind of things. It's going to smash the reverb into oblivion, and we'll have to pull the mix right down, but I'm going to just put this on just to try it out. I'm going to add a little bit of attack to it. We're going to take the amount off. We're going to have to push the volume because for some reason it always comes out really quiet. And then we're just going to gradually turn the amount up. But you can hear it's really aggressive. I mean, it's like, it enhances everything, but once you put a ducker on there, I'm going to put a utility on just to boost the volume to where we want it. I'm going to drop the kick in. So now we just need to loop that section. So I'm going to just right click, I'm going to crop it like that. And so you can see now that that's just created that whole thing into a path. We're going to hit loop, pull it back to the start, and then I'm going to pull the loop point back to the start. That sounds great. I'm just going to pitch this kick up a little bit, I think. Try that against the bass. That sounds pretty sweet. And again, keeping with the old school kind of vibe, let's just label this up as blue bass. And you know what? We'll color it blue. For those of you who watched any of my previous courses, you'll know that I am kind of obsessed with color coding. So, you know, you'll see me like, you know, religiously color everything so that it's something that I can remember it by. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some extra little flourishes into this. Let's just go around that section there. Take the velocity down on those. Because you can hear that the velocity affects the filter and the FM modulation in a different way. And then we'll just loop that around. I'm going to go into the sample. I've got a bunch of samples here from like old school hardcore stabs and synths, and this is like a really old sample collection, but it's got all these. That's kind of cool. So I'm just gonna put this into there. Where are we at? So first thing I'm gonna do is tune this so that I know that it's a concert pitch. So I know that this is the key that we're in. So I'm thinking something just like a little old school turnaround just on this last section here when the kick drum comes out. Something like that maybe. let's just so I'm going to do the select all, quantize. Kick out for a second. And then I'm going to put some ping pong delay on it. So then we're going to add just maybe a little bit of reverb to this, just to go along with the ping pong delay. Vintage verb again, I think. And then maybe just a little bit of multi-band compression, just to tame it really. We're going to copy the LFO tool that we used on the bass over onto this so that we've got the same side chain and effect, and then we'll just drag that all the way across to there, and we'll hit with the kick again. There we go. And then I think we're going to finish off this segment about starting a tech house track with a little bit of piano. Now, the classic piano sound, for those of you that don't know, the classic house piano sound came from a keyboard made by Korg in the mid '90s called the M1. It was kind of a revolutionary. It was a revolutionary synth because it was the first synthesizer workstation. It was fully sampled. It had expandable banks, and at the time, it was considered to have the best piano sound on any instrument. Any instrument that wasn't actually a piano. It wasn't the best piano sound. I mean, I guess it might have been at the time, but actually it's tinny and awful. But it is seminal. Without the M1 piano, a lot of house music would have sounded very, very different. You'll recognize it straight away because it's this real. It's just so super housey. Now the cool thing about one of the cool things on Ableton is it's got a bunch of MIDI effects, and one of the MIDI effects is a thing called chord. Now, what this allows you to do is take a single note and pitch it into a chord. So what I like to do to create that really old school sort of vibe is to use the chord plugin, which just starts off as a single note, and I like to create these like minor seventh crushes. Because that sounds like super, super old school housey. So what we do is we look at the thing. So we've got the root here. So let's take this down -12. There's our root. Then you've got the minor third. So that's 1, 2, 3 notes. Then you've got the fifth, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes. So we're going to hit 7. And then you've got the seventh, which is actually 10 notes, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're going to put this on 10 notes. And now we've got... And it's like perfect. It's like the absolute perfect house piano sound. And you can just play. I mean, it's technically not what would happen if you were playing, like, say, in a minor scale, because obviously some of the chords would be minor and some of them would be major. But that wasn't how things were done back in the 90s. Like, people just used to use, like, samples. That's why it sounds like it does. That's why there's so many ravey sort of tracks where there's just no real key to it. You know, they're just kind of like all over the place and crazy. And so this is really good at replicating that. So we're just gonna hit record and we're just gonna jam some stuff out. You know, and just see kind of like, kind of like just that last little bit there. It sounds kind of like as if it's right. So I'm going to just crop that. We're going to select all, quantize again, shrink everything down. Put a loop on that. So you can just kind of have that on a filter and just, you know, sort of gradually increase the filter. Let's put the Q width up a little bit. kick out. And then when it kicks in, we're just going to have it come kick back in with the bass and the kick. Let's have a quick look at some arrangement ideas, and then we'll move on to the next genre. So I was kind of doing a little bit of stuff there. You don't necessarily, tech house is kind of like a real, it's a real minimal kind of thing, you know, like the really important thing is the groove. And that's what we've got in this part right here. You know, this is the part that is the most exciting part of the record. This is the part that's, you know, going to keep people on the dance floor, and you add little bits of percussion in, or, you know, you do like small bits of filtering. So like say you'll, you know, you'll put a low cut on, and you'll just sort of kind of let that ride out for a little bit before dropping back in when you know the kick's going to come back in. You know, it's a very DJ-friendly kind of music, so you'd probably want to, you'll want the track to build up. I'm not going to go through all like the drum intro and stuff, but let's just assume that we've done the drum intro and that this is the main section. So we're going to pull this across the screen maybe for 2 minutes, right? And in this sort of like 2-minute section, we're going to want to start to introduce different parts of it. So we'll take out those old school hits, and we know that we've just got the bass here for now. And then like I'm gonna pull out the kick on this section, and that's gonna be where I introduce the old school hits. So I'm gonna sort of just delete the drums there. So you'll hear as this comes along now. And while we're coming through this section, I've just copied the first part of the piano over and over again. And you saw that I put a filter on it earlier, so I'm going to take this down to 200. And I'm going to do a gradual filter sweep on the piano until we get into the breakdown. So you can hear here now the kick's dropped out. And then we're going to get to the end of the bar, and we're going to kick back into the bass. Just these little figures like that, you know, it doesn't have to be anything special. It just needs to be something that's going to keep the dance floor's attention. Entirely happy with the key of that. That's much better. let's just see what this sounds like with just the kick on its own. Okay, let's take the kick out. And I'm going to put a held string over the top. Now, a couple of you might have seen how I do this before on my previous tutorial. But what I'm going to do right here is I'm just going to show you again. One of the ways I always like to get a really good held string sound is I use a string sample, like an old school string sample from one of the old Vengeance packs. There we go, high strings. So what I do is I copy one of these into a sampler instrument. Now, obviously you can see that this is pitched at G, so what we need to do is we need to bring this down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes. And that should just be at C now. So the C should be at C, and the G should be at G, which means the F should be at F, which is where we are doing this record. So let's just try and play that over this section here. Now you'll see you hold it down, but it kind of stops because the sample runs out. I'm actually going to do the held note on C because obviously C is the 5th note in the scale of F and F minor, which is what we're in at the moment. But what we need to do is we need to make that carry on. So we can loop the sound in Simpler and it'll just keep playing over and over again. But what you really want to find is like a section that's got like no clicks or anything in it. So what I like to do is I just like to pull the sample back. It's just length 100%, and then just find a section that's at a 0 crossing like that. And then I find another section that's at a 0 crossing. I can't hear any clicks on that now, so that must be okay. And so we're just going to put a held note in on C. Let's just drop a MIDI part in there. And we're going to put a held note on C. Probably not middle C though, it's a little bit too low. And I'm going to just bring the volume down. And have that fade in as the breakdown comes in. So one of the tricks I always use in build-ups and stuff is just drop the volume of the string on the sampler. One of the tricks I always use is reverb. Reverb's great for creating build-ups. So you can see down here, I always have like a set of bus reverbs. I've got a little drum room that I use to bus drums and stuff to. I've got a big stereo hall that I use to bus parts to for exactly what we're going to do now. And then I've got some like stereo delay as well, which is also for build-ups. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the stereo hall, the big hall reverb, and we're just going to gradually increase the amount of reverb throughout the breakdown. So you'll hear the filter will open up. And I'm just going to grab a couple of effects as well to throw in there. So obviously that's just like a little bit too much reverb, I think. We're going to do the same with the drums. We're going to bust the drums into that reverb too. So the whole thing has got this like huge build. In fact, I'm just going to copy the envelope across that we've used on that. And I think the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get this clap fill. And I'm just going to loop it all the way up like this. And then for the last few, I'm actually just going to loop a 16th of it. And we're going to just bring this back. To where the bass kicks in. And that's kind of like your tech house sort of breakdown. Obviously, you can do so much more with it. You know, I'm just going through the very, very basics with you right now. But you can see, you know, it's really easy to get that kind of, you know, that kind of awesome tech house effect. You know what would be a really cool thing to do is also repeat the idea of this, having this old school hit here. So we could actually chop everything out there and chop everything out there. And we'll turn the LFO tool off when that little bit comes in, and we'll also do it when that little bit comes in there. So you kind of get a real like. Now the only other thing we probably need to do is, because the reverb gets so intense there, is maybe just fade the reverb out at that point. And then we kind of probably want to have like a little white noise hit or something at the start. Nothing too obtrusive, because like I think that kind of period of everyone's life has passed now. You know, like we don't feel the necessity to put those kind of like crazy air blaster things over everything anymore. This Manuel de la Mer one from Sounds to Sample, there's a great little white noise in here. It's nothing, you know, it's nothing too crazy. It's just a real small white noise. You know, just very simple. We'll copy that across too. So let's just listen to that all the way through. Maybe just throw a little bit of mastering on there as well. I'm gonna just put like the ozone on there for now. There's a thing on here called Dance Club Master, which is like really good for this sort of stuff. Pull this down. Also, probably one of the other things that you want to do is like filter out the breakdown when it's kicking in. So I've put an EQ on the master, you can see, with a low cut on it. So what we're going to do is for this last sort of section here, I'm just going to bring this up, maybe up to like 600 hertz. But then we're going to come back down here. And I mean, you could probably really get away with putting like a low note under here as well. I mean, I could sit here for days and go through everything that I would do, but I'd just be writing the track for you, and I don't want to do that. This is just kind of like some basic ideas to get you started on how to, you know, how to get your tracks arranged and the ideas to come up with and the sound choices to go with. Like, what I'd probably do also is get this kick. Put it in there. See that high pass that I've put on there is already going too high, so we need to bring that down. So it's just we had a couple of glitches there because the isotope ozone is a very processor hungry piece of software, especially when you're using it in high latency mode like that. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic, and luckily because it's a mastering plugin, like you can really, you know, you can. It doesn't really matter once you've got to that point. Like, you know, the latency is not really that important. But what I'm going to do just to help that along is I'm going to switch my my audio buffer size to an even bigger one. I mean, it would mean that there's no possible way that I could play because there's so much latency on it. But it is going to make things a lot better. So let's just listen to that breakdown again. A little bit of stereo delay on that piano. They even sort of drop out some parts here. And there you've got it. That's pretty much how to start a tech house record. Obviously, you know, you're going to be able to go through these project files and have a look for yourself, see what you think. Maybe toy around with them, see what you can do with them. I'd love to hear what any of you add to this or take away from this or whatever. As you can see, this is just the very, very basic bare bones of what tech house is, and you know, I wouldn't sort of, you know, go so far as to say, oh, yeah, this is how all tech house sounds, because it's all very different, you know. But yeah, I hope you got a lot out of that. And for the next session, we're going to move on to a different genre. So thank you very much.